Hi, I'll continue with paragraph 21 from the chapter on the brace from Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's Versuch über die wahre Art das Klavier zu spielen. Der Doppelschlag allein kommt auch nach einer Note oder Vorschlag vor. Und zwar erstlich, wenn solche etwas lang sind, Figur 61a. Zweitens, bei einer Bindung, B. Und drittens, wenn Punkte noch folgen, C. I pointed out when covering paragraph 5 of this chapter on the brace how Bach described the positioning of the brace, that it occurs either above a note, über einer Note, or after it, nach selbiger, slightly to the right hand side of it. In this paragraph, paragraph 21, Bach talks again about the brace coming nach einer Note, or after the note. This could be relevant when we arrive at the example Bärenreiter quoted to justify the double speak they recommended in their introduction to Bach's book, when they said that when Bach writes before, one should read after. So in figure 61a, are braces appearing after notes that are somewhat long, as opposed to appearing over them. The third example shows the brace happening after an appoggiatura that is somewhat long. In B, we see the brace appearing in conjunction with a tie. And in C are dotted notes, after which comes braces. The first brace sign in C has been incorrectly placed by Bärenreiter, as one can see in the original notation, and as one could deduce from the same text Bärenreiter so expertly perused, corrected and improved. Bach is talking about braces that come after the note. It stands to reason that the braces in those examples are going to be coming in after the note and not over it. He just spent 14 paragraphs dealing with braces that come over notes. Those errors thrown my way by Bärenreiter, as representatives of Lilliput's roll of honour, provide real-time evidence to show that what I say about the roll of honour isn't just pulled out of thin air. There too, Bach placed the accidental to the right of the sign, since the F sharp comes in at the end of the brace as opposed to the beginning. So I just thought I'd mention that. Bach will go on now to explain how those braces in those situations are to be played. There is not a single person in Lilliput the roll of honour in the cage that knows how to play them. As it stands, I'm the only one. But then again, I'm not in Lilliput, nor am I in the cage, and neither will you be. That's why you're listening to this. And this is the appendix, an appendix to that paragraph. Der Doppelschlag nach einer Note oder einem Vorschläge kommt in allen Musikstücken fast alle Augenblicke vor und kann ohne unserem besonderen Zeichen nicht deutlich genug angedeutet werden. Man pflegt in diesem Falle das Zeichen des Theorpunkt hinter die Note zu setzen. In allen dreien Fällen dient zur Ausfüllung. I've seen the T-or sign placed after the note in organ music. I can't say I've encountered it in piano music, but should you encounter it, you'll know what to make of it. Again, it's the use of the trill sign to indicate an ornament other than a trill. So in all cases, after a somewhat long note or appoggiatura, together with a tie after dotted notes, the brace makes for the filling out or the filling in of a note. This can help with figuring out the right answer. When you know the function of something, what it's for, what it's meant to be doing, you can then ask yourself when trying it, is it doing that what it's meant to be doing? It is the only way of knowing if you're doing it right. Otherwise, one is blindly following dogma. Who'd be doing that, I wonder? When you encounter the brace in situations similar to any of those three instances in a score, you can say to yourself, that brace has been put there to fill out the note. Even that bit of information can be enough to get you past the surface level reading of the score. It connects you with the thought process of the composer, in this case Bach. And regarding Ausfüllung, you know, in the dictionary, it'll say filling in. And it's very often in German connected with a form, Ausfüllen, you know, filling in a form. And I looked at filling out, you know, the meaning, and it meant, you know, like you say it regarding somebody when they put on weight, that they're filling out. But I personally feel that filling out is the better description of what is happening, of what the ornament is doing with the note. Because instead of sort of filling it in like flat, it's filling it out. So exactly as if the it's putting weight on the note, or it's you know, the note is filling out. So even though the dictionary says filling in for Ausfüllen, I pick filling out. And Bach telling us that the brace after a note or appoggiatura occurs practically every moment in all pieces of music can as well be of help to know. And keep in mind when one encounters a classical music score full of T-or dot signs. This is in addition to the lesson Bach gave us with paragraphs 17 to 20. Where the trill signs mean something other than trills. And you'll find me going over paragraph 17 to 20 on this channel. Yeah, so if you see a classical music score, or a music score like Baroque or whatever, and it's full of trill signs, you don't have to get too worried about there being so many trills, because very often, you know, you can imagine with Bach saying that they occur practically every moment in all pieces of music, you could maybe imagine that many of those trill signs will in fact be braces. Im ersten Falle geschieht dieses bei allerlei Bewegung, nur nicht wohl vor einer fallenden Sekunde. Wenn man zuweilen bei einer Kadenz keinen Triller anbringen will, so macht man nach dem Vorschlage von unten, welcher in die Schlussnote hineingeht, einen Doppelschlag. Es darf aber alsdann über der letzten Note kein Mordend gemacht werden. Die Einteilung des Doppelschlags ist bei allen Exempeln unter A dieselbe, welche zuletzt abgebildet ist. So the brace that comes in after a somewhat long note or appoggiatura happens with all kinds of movement. For the examples under A, I had to check the original notation because there was something out of keeping with Bach's usual modus operandi, his MO, or you know how he does it, how he does things. In the first example, the brace occurs before an upward leaping third. And you'll have to excuse my Irishness, you know, not pronouncing the H, the TH. So when I say third, I mean that leap of three tones, and not the other kind of third. And if I say, you know, like falling thirds on a G string, I mean a descending sequence of thirds being played on the G string of a stringed instrument. The next example shows the brace again coming in before an upward leaping note. So in the first example, the brace occurs before an upward leaping third. The next example shows the brace again coming in before an upward leaping note. Normally, I might have expected here a downward leaping version. So maybe instead, I'd have expected the brace to occur after the F, before it goes to the D. So before a downward leaping third. Can a brace be done there? Bach is providing us the means to be able to determine that for ourselves. This would have been like in paragraph 13 of the chapter on trills, with its figure 27D, where Bach provides all the movement, rising by step, leaping upwards and leaping downwards, bar that of the afterstroke or the trill's turn being followed by a falling second, which would be an F after the G in the case of figure 27D. So it would have been like that. So finally, in figure 61A, we see the brace coming in before a rising or ascending second, a steigende Sekunde. Normally I'd be saying how, to fit the text, The only movement missing in those examples is that of a falling second. Now I have to say what's missing is a downward leap and a falling second. So perhaps the placement of the sign of the brace in the second example is an oversight, and the brace is not there where it is meant to be. And I'll just read again. This is the translation of what Bärenreiter wrote in their introduction to this book. So Bärenreiter say, Bach could be justifiably proud that the text as well as the notation in both his essays were practically faultless or free from mistake. We only noticed one spot that is problematic with regard to its content. To begin with, Bach localizes the pral trill before a falling second. In reality, however, it is sitting on the second note, thus after a falling second. Therefore, one should also read after in the first instance. So, that was what Bärenreiter wrote. They went through his Versuch, Bach's Versuch, with a red pen and ticked all the correct stuff and wrote in the margin exactly true, my thoughts exactly. And found it practically faultless. But they did have a slight critique that he didn't properly use the words before and after. So when you read before in the text, you should change it in your mind to meaning after. And Bärenreiter didn't notice that spot in figure 61a for its potential fault or mistake or oversight. They didn't notice it. And they didn't notice their own errors. Couldn't remember if I mentioned that they, got the example wrong, but I did mention it. So they didn't notice their own errors. In their introduction, they identified the wrong note as being a falling second, which is down to a fundamental flaw in their understanding, one that requires a certain level of neglect and negligence to preserve. So they identify the wrong note as being the falling second, and they are wrong with that. And it could be that that's the way it's seen today, and that people will say, oh no, that's the way it's seen today, the way Bärenreiter sees it. But it doesn't matter how many people see it the same as Bärenreiter, it doesn't make it right. The number of people who do it the same does not make something right or wrong. It's like sheep. If they're told, they're going the wrong way, they'll say, oh no, we're not, because the first sheep went that way. We couldn't be going the wrong way because we're going the same way as that first sheep went. And that'll be the same as that. There can be 100,000 people getting it wrong. There can be 1 million people getting it wrong. There can be 100 million people getting it wrong. Just as well as there could be 100 million sheep going in the wrong direction. The number does not make something right or wrong. Nor did they notice the consistency of Bach's use of the term before. This is another case where Bach is properly able to use the terms before and after. Bärenreiter would understand the D, the first note in the asterisk example of figure 61, as being the falling second, and would want you to read, if there have been a brace sign after the D, after a falling second, instead of what Bach wrote, namely before a falling second. So according to Bärenreiter, that sentence in paragraph 22 would go, in the first case this happens with all sorts of movements, just not well after a falling second. That's what Bärenreiter would want to say, how Bärenreiter would want to correct it. But they don't. They didn't correct that one. And it shows how inconsistent and short-sighted they are. The error by Bärenreiter I previously pointed out, where they incorrectly placed the sign of the brace in figure 51C after the appoggiatura from below, and that was a B, is further proof of their obliviousness to the text and how they are in no position to be giving advice. The A is the falling second in this example. And if what Bärenreiter notated hadn't been incorrect, it would have been Bach providing an example of a brace occurring after an appoggiatura before a falling second, doing or prescribing that what he says in paragraph 22 doesn't work well. So he wrote, in the first case this happens with all sorts of movement, just not well before a falling second. All this shows just how high their opinion of themselves is. Bärenreiter. It shows their hubris. And you can hear that there in what they wrote. Bach could be justifiably proud that the text as well as the notation in both his essays were practically free from fault or free from mistake. We only noticed one spot that is problematic with regard to its content. Bärenreiter should have spent more time watching out that their notation and text isn't littered full of mistakes. But they went over Bach's and with their eagle eye, with their supreme understanding and insight into music and their reading comprehension skills, they didn't spot a single mistake. I won't waste time on that. In paragraph 19, we were told that one will never find the brace over a final note that has been preceded by an appoggiatura from below. We find out now, though, that the brace can come in after the appoggiatura from below and before the final note, when one doesn't want to introduce a trill at the cadence. Again, this is broadening our complete picture regarding Bach's stance on ornamentation, giving it nuance. It shows just how it can be thought of, and that there can be more options available or variations or permutations, whatever the word is, to choose from than one might initially think. One could have read that, that the paragraph 19, when Bach says it shouldn't come in over a final note that has been preceded by an appoggiatura from below, and think a brace should not occur anywhere near that. And here you can see, but it can in fact occur right before the final note, after the appoggiatura from below. So it shows like nuance, the degree to which what Bach says can be used. Then he says you can't do a mordant over the final note. This is the second time Bach mentions the brace not being followed by a mordant. He did so in paragraph 15. Wir merken hierbei an, dass der Doppelschlag über einem Vorschlage nicht leidet, dass die folgende Note einen Zierat bekomme. Figur 56. This might have been a common occurrence, I can easily imagine, and a pet hate of Bach's. A pet peeve. One can see how the brace is divided up in the bar at the end of the example with the asterisks. And Bach says it'll be the same for the other two examples. So that's how they're played. Im zweiten Falle entsteht nach der bindenden Note ein Punkt. Und die letzte Note des Doppelschlags macht mit der gebundenen eine Note aus. Ist die Zeitmaß aber hürtig, so fällt der Punkt weg. Beide Einteilungen sind bei B deutlich angezeigt. Dieses Exempel kommt oft vor Kadenzen vor. So what happens in B is that the C at the end of the first bar, which is the tied note, becomes in moderato dotted, i.e. a dot arises after it. And from that tied note to the last note of the brace is the equivalent of one note, or one beat, or one measure. So you arrive on the downbeat with the next C, which is the note to which the tied note is tied. And then in tempo markings from allegro on, there is no dot. But the tied note plus the brace still constitutes one note. So that's how that'll be played or divided up. The moderato and allegro variations can provide a clue as to the tempo of the examples from figure 61a and to what Bach will have in mind when he says a somewhat long note, and how deep and dark those recesses of the cage are where the metronomes, with their metronome theory, dwell. I don't appeal to them, but I do appeal to their victims. You don't have to be there, not with what I'm providing. One could deduce from Bach's written out execution that those examples in A are allegro. Of course, the ultimate proof is to be found in your playing, when you play according to the true way to play the piano and not the dishonest way. Then what feels right and natural will be the correct answer. You can see how if you're reliant on the metronome, counting, learning the notes, slow practice, breaking it up into rhythms, all that stuff, etc., how none of that will be possible. Like noticing the correct answer. Because everything you do will be unnatural and forced. All it'll be will be notes and noise. That's why it is a cage, and that's why you're completely cut off from the right answer. Because you're waiting to be told what to do, and it's just the arbitrary decision by your teacher or yourself of what you'd prefer, of what you'd like. It's like the airplane builder. It's thinking, I'd like 50 wings on my thing, without having any conception of the laws of physics, the principles of flight. And they'll, and it's got nothing to do with a plane that actually flies. And the same is when you're deciding about expression. Oh, I think I'll have a little crescendo in here, and I think I'll make this forte and all. It's like a plane that doesn't lift off the ground. And you might feel good having all your decisions to make and feeling, like it's a pick and mix, a buffet that you can pick from. But it's not. The principles of flight have to be obeyed, and so too the laws of music or the laws of nature have to be obeyed. And if you have no connection to them, if all you're playing is notes and noise, you'll never be able to experience the right answer, because everything you do is forced. Forcing it can mean doing things that are based on a decision that's founded on nothing, just like whatever the trend is. Just, like your teacher is one of those sheep that followed that first sheep that went in the wrong direction. And they feel they're right because they're saying what everybody else is saying. That's forced. Unnatural and forced. Forced is not necessarily, being tense and seizing up from tension and still trying to play it even though you're tense. That's not, that's only one level of forcing it. Another level of forcing it is imposing your intellect onto something that should be obeying the laws of nature, the laws of physics, the laws of music. And just a little tip when performing this. One could think of it not as the brace coming in at the end of the bar, but rather of it coming in right before the next, right before the downbeat of the next bar. That can be that's something that I've found useful. Like for the opening of the Appassionata Sonata. The Roll of Honor get the rhythm wrong. They can't comprehend the rhythm of that opening. And even Kissin, he gets it wrong. He never, because he's just playing it like everybody else is playing it. And a good way to get that right is to think of the short notes as not coming in at the end, but rather right before the beginning of the next beat. And that way you can better feel the pulse. So you don't have to be hanging on to the note. You can already be thinking of the next note. You can be thinking of the pulse, even though you have a difficult, like, long note combined with a very short note. You don't have to be thinking of that short note, and it can obstruct your view of the pulse. So if you think of the pulse and the short note coming in right before the pulse, your attention, your feeling, everything, your body, it'll all be aligned with the pulse rather than waiting till the end of the long note. You don't have to think about the long note at all anymore. You can think about the next pulse, the downbeat, whatever it is, and the small note comes in. And as well with the brace, you can do that. Instead of thinking, I'll have to try and like spot where the end of the beat is. You don't. You can have in you where the next beat comes in and just do it right before that. So that's a tip. It would have served Kissin well in the opening of the Appassionata, for the example, and he might not have gotten it wrong. He might have done it differently than everybody else in the Roll of Honour does it, but he didn't. He did it the same as they all do it. And so the example often occurs before cadences. Okay, I'll leave it at that for this video, and I'll pick up where I left off in the next. Thanks. Bye.